The rain pounded the streets of Brooklyn like it was trying to wash away every secret we'd ever kept. Ezra sat across from me in our favorite cafe, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug, eyes fixed on the steam curling upward like it held the answers to the universe. I knew something was wrong. Ezra didn't fidget unless his heart was a battlefield. "Liam," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something, and it might ruin everything." His hazel eyes flicked up to meet mine, and in that moment, I felt the ground shift beneath us. The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy as the storm outside, and I braced myself for a truth I wasn't sure I could handle. We'd been best friends since we were 12. Two misfits navigating the chaos of middle school in upstate New York. Ezra, with his messy curls and infectious laugh, was the dreamer who'd sketch entire worlds in the margins of his notebooks. I was the pragmatist, the one who'd drag him out of his head and into the real world, whether it was sneaking into abandoned barns or binge-watching sci-fi movies until dawn. For 15 years, we'd been each other's anchor, through family dramas, heartbreaks, and the grind of building lives in the city. But lately, something had shifted. His glances lingered too long. His smiles carried a quiet ache, and I'd started to notice the way my pulse raced when he was near. I pushed it down, buried it under the label of friendship, because what else could it be? That night in the cafe, though, there was no burying it. Ezra leaned forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'm in love with you, Liam. I've been in love with you for years." The words hit like a lightning strike, splitting my world in two. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mind was a tangle of shock, fear, and something else I couldn't name. Something warm and terrifying that had been growing inside me for longer than I cared to admit. The cafe buzzed around us, oblivious to the earthquake in our little corner. A barista called out an order. A couple laughed at the counter, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Ezra's confession wasn't just words. It was a grenade lobbed into the life we'd built together, threatening to blow apart the safety of our friendship. And yet, as I stared into his eyes, I saw something else, a flicker of hope, a plea for me to meet him halfway. I don't know what to say," I stammered, my voice betraying the storm inside me. "Ezra, you're my best friend. This changes everything." His face fell, just for a second, before he masked it with a tight smile. "I know, and I'm sorry if this screws things up, but I couldn't keep pretending. Not anymore." He stood, grabbing his jacket, and I realized he was about to walk out into the rain, out of my life, if I didn't say something. "Wait," I said, my hand shooting out to grab his wrist. His skin was warm under my fingers, and the contact sent a jolt through me. "Don't go. Not yet." He hesitated, his eyes searching mine for something, permission, maybe, or a sign that I wasn't about to break his heart. I didn't know what I was feeling, only that letting him walk away felt like losing a piece of myself I'd never get back. That night, we talked until the cafe closed, the rain a steady drumbeat against the windows. Ezra spilled everything: how he'd realized his feelings in college, how he dated others to try to forget me, how every moment we spent together was both a joy and a quiet kind of torture. I listened, my heart a mess of guilt and longing. I'd always known I loved Ezra, but I'd never let myself question what kind of love it was. Growing up in a small town, I'd learned early to keep certain thoughts locked away, to play the part of the guy who dated girls, who fit in. But Ezra's confession was a key, unlocking a door I'd nailed shut years ago. "I need time," I told him as we stood outside under the awning, the rain slowing to a drizzle. "This is a lot." He nodded, his expression a mix of relief and pain. "Take all the time you need. Just don't hate me, okay?" "I could never hate you," I said, and the truth of it burned in my chest. As he walked away, his silhouette blurring in the misty streetlights, I felt the weight of a choice I wasn't ready to make. But deep down, I knew one thing. Our life would never be the same. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk. I avoided Ezra, not because I wanted to, but because every time I thought about him, my head spun. I'd catch myself replaying his confession. The way his voice cracked when he said he loved me. The way his hand felt in mine. I'd always prided myself on being decisive. Running my own graphic design business required it, but this was uncharted territory. I was terrified of what it meant. Not just for us, but for me. What did it say about me that my best friend's words had stirred something I'd spent years ignoring? I threw myself into work, designing logos for clients I barely cared about. But Ezra was everywhere. His favorite song played on my playlist. His old texts lit up my phone. And every corner of Brooklyn seemed to hold a memory of us. One night, I found an old sketch he'd done of us as kids, taped inside my high school yearbook. We were laughing, arms slung around each other, carefree in a way I hadn't felt in years. I traced the lines of his drawing, my chest aching with a truth I couldn't outrun. I missed him. And maybe, just maybe, I loved him too. I called him that night, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Can we talk?" I asked when he picked up, his voice cautious but warm. We met at Prospect Park, the late autumn leaves crunching under our feet. The air was crisp, the sky a bruised purple, and Ezra looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I thought you were done with me," he said, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I'm not," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I needed to figure out what this means. For me. For us." He nodded, his eyes guarded. "And did you?" I took a deep breath, the words clawing their way out. "I think I've been in love with you too. I just didn't know it until you said it out loud." His eyes widened, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold air. "Liam, don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean it," I said, and the weight of those words felt like freedom. "But I'm scared. Ezra, I don't know how to do this." He smiled, soft and sad. "Me neither. But maybe we can figure it out together." We stood there, inches apart, the park fading into the background. My heart pounded, but for the first time in weeks. It wasn't fear driving it, it was hope. I reached for his hand, and when his fingers laced with mine, it felt like coming home. The weeks that followed were a blur of discovery and doubt. Holding Ezra's hand in Prospect Park had felt like a promise. But promises are fragile when the world isn't always kind. We were stepping into something new, something neither of us fully understood. And every step carried the weight of what we stood to lose: our friendship, our family's approval, the comfort of the lives we'd known. We started small, testing the waters. Coffee dates turned into late-night walks through the city, our conversations weaving between the mundane and the profound. Ezra told me about his first crush, a boy in our high school art class who'd never known how Ezra felt. I admitted I'd dated my ex-girlfriend, Sarah, longer than I should have because she was safe, a shield against questions I wasn't ready to answer. Each confession chipped away at the walls we'd built, but it also exposed us to new fears. What if this didn't work? What if we ruined everything? One night, we ended up at a dive bar in Williamsburg, the kind of place where the jukebox played Springsteen and the air smelled of stale beer. We sat in a corner booth, our knees brushing under the table, and Ezra's laughter lit up the dim room. "You remember that time we got stuck in that barn during the thunderstorm?" he asked, his eyes glinting with mischief. "How could I forget? You were convinced we'd be struck by lightning," I teased, leaning closer. I wasn't wrong to worry. That place was a death trap. He grinned, but then his expression softened. That was the first time I realized I might love you. You were so calm, making dumb jokes to keep me from freaking out. I felt safe. My chest tightened. I didn't know. I didn't want you to, he said quietly. I thought it'd scare you off. I reached for his hand under the table, my thumb brushing over his knuckles. It doesn't scare me anymore. That was a half-truth. I wasn't scared of Ezra or what I felt for him, but I was terrified of the world outside our bubble. My family wasn't exactly progressive. Me dad still threw around words like traditional, like they were a personality trait. Ezra's parents were better, but even they had their limits. And then there was the rest of the world, the stares, the whispers, the judgment we'd face for daring to love each other openly. The first test came sooner than I expected. A week later, we were at a friend's gallery opening in Manhattan. A crowded room full of artsy types and cheap wine. Ezra was in his element, charming everyone with his stories about his latest illustration project. I watched him from across the room, my heart swelling with pride and something deeper. Something that made me want to cross the room and kiss him right there. But when I finally made my way over, one of our old high school friends, Jake, cornered us. So, you two are, like, a thing now? Jake asked, his tone half curious, half mocking. Ezra froze, his smile faltering. I stepped closer, my shoulder brushing his. Yeah, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. We are. Jake raised an eyebrow, smirking. Huh. Didn't see that coming. You sure you're not just confused? Liam. The word stung, but Ezra's hand found mine, grounding me. We're not confused, he said, his voice firm. And if you've got a problem with it, that's on you. Jake shrugged, muttering something about just asking, and walked away. But the moment stuck with us, a reminder that not everyone would understand. Later, as we walked home through the neon-lit streets, Ezra was quiet. His usual spark dimmed. You okay? I asked, stopping under a streetlight. He sighed, running a hand through his curls. I hate that we have to justify ourselves. Like we owe anyone an explanation. We don't, I said, stepping closer. We only owe each other the truth. He looked at me, his eyes softening. And what's your truth? Liam. I didn't think. Just acted. I cupped his face and kissed him. Right there on the sidewalk. The city humming around us. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then fierce, like he'd been holding back for years. When we pulled apart, breathless, he laughed at a sound so pure it drowned out the noise of the world. That's my truth, I said, my voice rough with emotion. From that moment, we stopped hiding. We held hands in public, stole kisses in crowded subway cars, and built a world that was ours, even if it was small. But the bigger world kept pushing back. My sister, Emma, was the first in my family to notice something had changed. She cornered me at a family dinner, her eyes sharp with suspicion. You've been weird lately, she said, folding her arms. And you and Ezra are different. What's going on? I wanted to tell her, but the words stuck in my throat. Emma had always been my ally, but this felt like a leap I wasn't ready for. It's complicated, I said finally, hating how weak it sounded. She didn't push, but her silence said enough. I knew I'd have to tell my family eventually, and the thought made my stomach churn. Ezra's family was another story. His mom called him one night, her voice tight with worry after hearing rumors from a mutual friend. Ezra, are you gay? She asked, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. I'm in love with Liam, he told her, his voice steady. That's what matters. The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, "I just want you to be happy. But it's going to be hard." She wasn't wrong. The world didn't stop turning because we'd found each other. And not everyone was ready to celebrate. But every time I doubted, Ezra was there, his hand in mine, his smile a reminder that we were worth fighting for. The holidays brought everything into sharp focus. Christmas was always a big deal in my family. A chaotic gathering at my parents' house upstate, complete with my dad's overcooked turkey and my mom's relentless holiday cheer. This year, though, the idea of sitting through it without Ezra felt unbearable. We decided to spend the day together in the city, but I knew I couldn't keep dodging my family forever. "I want you to come with me," I told Ezra one night, curled up on his couch in his tiny Bushwick apartment. "To Christmas. As us." He looked at me, his eyes wide with surprise. "You sure? Your dad's not exactly the live and let live type." "I know," I said, my stomach twisting. "But I'm tired of pretending. I want them to know who I am, who we are." Ezra squeezed my hand, his warmth steadying me. "Okay, but we do this together." "Yeah." The drive upstate was quiet, the snow-dusted fields stretching endlessly under a gray sky. Ezra fiddled with the radio, landing on some cheesy pop song that made us both laugh. But the closer we got, the heavier the air felt. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Dinner started off fine, me mom's usual chatter about neighbors and recipes, Emma sneaking me worried glances. But when my dad asked why Ezra was here instead of with his own family, the room went still. I took a deep breath, my hand finding Ezra's under the table. "Dad, Mom, there's something I need to tell you," I said, my voice shaking. "Ezra and we're together. We're in love." The silence was deafening. My mom's fork clattered against her plate. My dad's face hardened, his jaw tight. "What do you mean? Together?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I mean, we're a couple," I said, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "I love him. I've always loved him." My mom's eyes filled with tears, and I couldn't tell if it was sadness or confusion. "Liam, honey, are you sure? This isn't, I mean, you've always, I'm sure," I said, cutting her off. "This is who I am." My dad stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is nonsense. You're confused. Liam, you've been friends with Ezra forever. And now you think I'm not confused," I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "I've spent years being confused, trying to be who you wanted. But this is me, and I'm not apologizing for it." Ezra's hand tightened around mine, his presence a lifeline. My dad stormed out, muttering something about needing air, and my mom just sat there, staring at her plate. Emma was the only one who spoke. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." The rest of the night was a blur. My dad didn't come back inside, and my mom made awkward small talk until we left. In the car, Ezra reached for my hand. "You were amazing," he said softly. "I know that was hard." "It was," I admitted, my throat tight. "But it was worth it." Back in the city, we spent Christmas Eve in Ezra's apartment, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow fall outside. It wasn't the holiday I'd imagined, but it was ours, and that was enough. We talked about the future, moving in together, maybe starting a creative studio where Ezra could illustrate and I could design. For the first time, I let myself dream of a life that wasn't dictated by fear. But the fallout wasn't over. My dad's silence stretched into weeks, and my mom's calls were stilted, full of questions she didn't know how to ask. Ezra's mom came around faster, inviting us for dinner, and trying her best to understand. Still, every step forward came with a reminder of how far we had to go. At a New Year's Eve party, a drunk acquaintance made a snide comment about choosing a lifestyle, and I saw the hurt flash across Ezra's face. I pulled him onto the dance floor, spinning him until we were both laughing, the world fading away. "You're my home. You know that," I whispered, my forehead pressed against his. "Always," he said, and kissed me as the crowd counted down to midnight. Spring brought a new kind of hope. Ezra and I moved into a tiny apartment in Greenpoint. Our belongings a chaotic mix of my design books and his art supplies. The place was a mess, creaky floors, leaky faucets, but it was ours. Every night, we'd cook terrible dinners and laugh until we couldn't breathe, building a life brick by brick. My dad finally called in March. His voice was gruff, hesitant, but he asked to meet. We sat in a diner near his office, the clatter of dishes filling the awkward silences. "I don't understand this," he said, staring at his coffee. "But you're my son, and I don't want to lose you." It wasn't acceptance. Not fully, but it was a start. I told him about Ezra, about how he made me feel alive in a way I'd never known. My dad listened, his expression softening just enough to give me hope. "Just be happy, Liam," he said finally. "That's all I want." Ezra's family came around too, in their own way. His mom started sending us recipes, and his sister invited us to her wedding, making it clear we were welcome as a couple. The world wasn't perfect. There were still stares, still moments when we felt like outsiders, but we had each other. And that was a strength I hadn't known I needed. One evening, as we sat on our tiny balcony overlooking the city, Ezra pulled out his sketchbook. He'd drawn us, standing together in a world of his own creation, surrounded by stars and colors that felt like hope. "This is us," he said, his voice soft. "No matter what." I looked at the drawing, then at him, and felt a certainty I'd never known before. "I want this forever," I said. "You and me." He smiled, his eyes bright with tears. "Then let's make it forever." We didn't have all the answers. The world was still messy, still full of people who'd judge us. But we'd built something stronger than their doubts. Ezra's confession had torn down the life I'd known, the one where I hid parts of myself to fit in. But in its place, we'd created something better, a life where love wasn't a secret, where we could be whole. As the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I leaned against Ezra, his warmth a promise of tomorrow. We'd lost pieces of our old lives, but we'd gained something infinitely more precious, each other. And in that moment, I knew that every risk, every fight, every tear had been worth it. Because this messy, beautiful, hard one, life was the one I'd secretly always wanted.